So we're in the Easter season, and it feels appropriate to ask the question, what is church? And I'll let you know right now, I don't have an answer. My microphone is not on. So what is church? I'm not necessarily going to be able to answer this question, but sometimes asking the question is what gives us direction. So we're going to do this in 3 acts. We're going to use the scriptures that we've heard to ask ourselves, what is church? So the first act, our psalm. What is the context of our psalms? Psalms historically were songs. They were hymns. They were music. This particular psalm is what is called a battle psalm. It is one in which things weren't necessarily going all that well for the people of Israel, and yet they had faith, and they beseeched God. They spoke with God. They engaged with God. And in the Psalms, there are many kinds of Psalms, but they can be roughly categorized into 2 areas, 2 groups: lament and thanksgiving. So as we ask ourselves, what is church? I think it's important to name some of our own context. And some of that context in the church, whether that's a congregation such as the United Church in Meadowood, whether that's a denomination called the United Church of Canada, we get stuck sometimes in conversations around deficit. We look at numbers. We talk about money. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But if we get stuck in the numbers, we don't necessarily live into lament, which is naming the realities of the struggles before us, of the challenges that we experience. Lament is a reminder of the other kind of psalm, which is thanksgiving, which is in God there is abundance. And again, the human word for that might be something like profit. We might look at numbers and say, oh, look at this sanctuary, it's full, we're doing really well. But is that sound theology? Does that resonate with the early church? Does that resonate for us? For abundance is never limited to just numbers, but the quality of life, the passion of one's message. So what is church? Do we arrive in this place each Sunday seeking abundance? In our second passage, we have Thomas, sometimes called Thomas the Doubter. Thomas arrives and wants proof. He says, unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe. Thomas the Doubter. For Thomas, sometimes we think of doubt as a bad thing. We don't like to ask questions. And I wonder if the Psalms encourage us to see abundance. Does Thomas encourage us to wonder? Is it possible that line when he says, unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my fingers in the mark of the nails and my hand is in his side, I will not believe. Is it possible? That's about wonder. It's about seeing in life things that just baffle you. So what is church? Why are we here on this day? What questions do we ask from our scripture? And from where do they lead us as we ask these questions? Which takes us to Act 3. I hope. Philip and the eunuch. Does anybody know who Philip was? Philip is one of the first 7 deacons in the church. The other one you might have heard of, most commonly known as Stephen, who was the first martyr. Stephen is one of these deacons who is sent out from the church. He is sent out to proclaim the good news. But what is good news? How does the good news resonate? How do we, as we endeavor to understand what it means to be church, mean by the good news? What is it we can learn from Philip as one of the first deacons? Philip is told to leave the church. He's told to go outside of its walls and to spread the good news. And to whom does he spread the good news? Well, it's interesting. Does he spread the good news in this passage, or is he actually asked, challenged by a stranger on the road? And who is this eunuch? On the surface, when we read the scripture of the context, the eunuch is a powerful man. He represents a queen. Yet if you dig deeper into the context of this man named Philip, he is a eunuch. It is important to understand what that means in this culture. He's an outsider. He has intentionally been castrated by a culture that recognizes the power of men, and that in order for this man to represent the royalty, the house which he administers, he cannot be intact because he could be a threat. So he is intentionally maimed. He's also not a Jew. He's an outsider. He's not even from Jerusalem. Why he was there, there's lots of conjecture as to why this outsider, this man who has been intentionally castrated, is in Jerusalem at the time. But what we know is that on this road in Samaria, and as a reminder, Samaria again is a place of the outsider. It's not a place where you would go and sell your brand. It's not a place where you would go and say, I'm going to get a lot of profit and a lot of money from this context. Maybe the 20-somethings might buy our product, but we're not going to go into Samaria. So there's a whole bunch of things happening when Philip is told to go and spread the good news in an area that is filled with outsiders, and then from an outsider from the Jewish family. And this man asks questions. And he asks questions, and the scripture that is read is about justice. What does it mean to be church? So if faith is expressed as wonder, and wonder leads us into questions, I suspect it's appropriate to say that the good news comes from us doing some analysis in our own context of asking, who are the eunuchs in our midst? Who are those who we judge, who we ostracize, who we push out? Yet who are the people for whom the good news is meant? The good news that life abundant, that we are blessing. And I came up with two things, and I would offer these for your consideration. The first is the affirming process here at the United Church in Meadowood. For some, this is a non-starter. It's not a topic that really needs to be talked about. Many people actually already think we're an affirming congregation. For some, this continues to be a difficult conversation. It continues to be challenging to our theologies with which we have been raised, of asking, what does sexual orientation mean? What does it mean who we love and what our families look like? And for some, this may not even be a conversation that you've had yet. Yet for this congregation that in 2006 decided that its marriage policy would reflect that regardless of who you love, this faith community would marry. This congregation in this affirming process is an invitation for us to say, what does it mean to welcome the outsider? And perhaps more importantly, that when we welcome the outsider, are we actually willing to be changed? Are we willing to be challenged as the eunuch did to Philip on that road? And the second part about what does it mean to be church? What does it mean to be church in the 21st century? Occurred to me to talk a little more about Bill 18. Does everybody know what Bill 18 is? I'm seeing nodding, but I won't assume. Bill 18 is legislation in this province that explicitly says bullying is wrong. That says that the words we actually use translate into actions, and that words themselves are actions and can actually hurt people. There has been a response to this bill because part of the bill has a provision that says schools and organizations need to have what's called a GSA, which is a gay straight alliance. For it is often the children in our lives who are asking themselves about sexual orientation, which, by the way, I'm pretty certain isn't new, and they get bullied, and they die. And there are communities of faith that have spoken out against this particular provision and say it's against their religious freedom, their religious right. And I think that we as a denomination, as a congregation that is endeavoring in our affirm process, need to know where the line is when we engage in conversations with our ecumenical brothers and sisters. This may not be an easy conversation. It may not be a place that we're comfortable to go. But Philip and the eunuch, in a place of wonder that says every single one of you sitting in this room is a beloved child of God. And if what we believe leads a child of God to die by suicide, I think we need to look in the mirror and ask what it is does it mean to be church.
Take to the roads. Oh, the mountain is calling. The traveler's time to come home. I'll come home to find the God that is bigger than the sum of our deeds, the taker of fears and the giver of dreams, the God that is bigger than the plans we have made, than the bombs in the sky or the flags that we wave. The mountain is calling, it's calling to those who adhere. Turn your swords into plows, find the love that casts out all fear. And you will find the God that is bigger than the sum of our deeds, the taker of fears and the giver of dreams, the God that is bigger than the plans we have made, than the bombs in the sky or the flags that we wave. The mountain is calling, it's calling out to us all, saying, build up the little ones and tear down all of your walls. Tear them down to find the God that is bigger than the sum of our deeds, the taker of fears and the giver of dreams, the God that is bigger than the plans that we've made, than the bombs in the sky or the flags that we wave.
And the good news is that we are called out to share this message.